Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch the interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me. Hello and welcome to a special interview for The Wire. Once upon a time, her party called her Rita. Her first big battle with corporate India was over the right to wear saris, and she's met Charles Sobhraj. And if you haven't guessed who I'm talking about, she's the author of this wonderful book in my hands. It's called An Education for Rita, and she is, of course, Senior Politburo member of the Communist Party Marxist, Brinda Karat. Brinda Karat, let's start with the title of
Glad
your
you
book.
didn't call me Rita.
Well, in fact, I was going to ask you, where did you get that name Rita? Because most people, when they pick up the book, wouldn't realize An Education for Rita is actually you.
During the emergency, many political activists had to change their name. They were semi-underground or underground. So my change of name happened because I was in a textile workers meeting. You know, in North Delhi, there was a very big mill, the Birla textile mill, and I was working with the union then. And I got a message from Comrade Surjit, who said that your home in Calcutta has been raided by the police in Bengal. So we think that you should start working under a different name in Delhi. So I asked the workers, well, I have to have a name. So I suggested Sheila. I rather liked the name Sheila. This is before I met Sheila Dixit. But anyway, then...
And you started to dislike the name after you met Sheila Dixit?
No, not at all. Not at all. She was a wonderful, wonderful woman. No, not at all. But what happened was that one of the workers called Chandrabhan, I think he was a wrestler from West UP, a real pehelwan of a worker. And he said, thank God we have the opportunity to change your name. He could never pronounce my name. He always called me Birinder. And I tried so often to say, Chandrabhan ji, my name Brinda hai, Brinda, Varinda. So then he said that, okay, let's call you by a name we can pronounce easily. And from that day on, he christened me Rita. So that was it. I was Comrade Rita. And even now, many of the old textile workers whom I meet, they always refer to me as Rita.
So his inability to pronounce your name properly meant that you had to change your name and you chose the simplest name possible.
Well, he chose it, Rita. He said it's simple, easy to pronounce, and we won't be mixing you up with another Sheila who happened to be the wife of the leader of that union.
So not only is your name Rita, but you were christened by Chandrabhan.
Yes, exactly.
Now, I gather your first major battle with corporate India happened in 1967 when you were in London and you were working for Air India. And it was over the right to wear saris rather than a miniskirt. Tell me that story.
Actually, it really wasn't a battle with corporate India as such, because that wasn't in my mind at all, that this is corporate India and Brinda is fighting corporate. It was nothing like that. When I got there, I had been working at the airport in Calcutta earlier, and then I was transferred to London on my request, and I got the posting. And when I went there, they told me, you have to wear a skirt, and a coat and a skirt. So I said, why? Not that I was against coats and skirts, I wore them often enough, but I just felt that with a national airline of India, why should I be wearing a skirt? So I said, no, I'm going to continue to wear my sari. So that was a big issue because all the British girls thought I was just nuts. They said, my God, here we're fighting to make our skirts shorter. Mini skirt was a fashion in London then.
And you're doing the opposite.
Here's this crazy Indian woman insisting on wearing a sari. But anyway, it ended well because, do you know Bobby Cooker? You know, he's a legendary commercial director.
And responsible for Air India's brilliant advertising.
That Maharaja.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that was Bobby Cooker. And then a letter came to my manager at the airport. And he said, well, not only Brinda, but any other person employed by Air India, British or Indian, can wear the sari. So it was a wonderful day because all these girls who just hated this thing and had no sympathy for me, they all queued up and said, Brinda, please help us to learn to wear the sari.
And if I recall correctly, because I was in London shortly after that myself, and I had a sister who worked for Air India, Air India's uniform for Western women was rather ordinary, but its saris were pretty stunning.
Stunning saris. Absolutely beautiful saris they had. They had one, I remembered, it was a striped sari, and the other one was with flowers. I mean, it was well before Sabyasachi and so on, but they must have had a very good designer. But yeah, those saris were beautiful.
Now, the 60s and 70s was a time when there was great excitement and turmoil in London. It was a moment of flux and change. And as you write in your book, you could not be young in London in the late 60s and remain untouched. How do you remember London in the 70s and 60s?
You were there also, no?
I was there from 72.
72. By then, I mean, the changes had started coming in already. But certainly in the 60s, there was a revolt against the establishment. And it expressed itself in a myriad, multiple ways. Pop music, the whole, it was so revolutionary.
Carnaby Street.
Carnaby Street, that was more like the hippie era. But I'm talking about Dylan or even, you know, some of Lennon's songs. And then there was the hippie movement, there was the anarchist movement, there was Black Power, and there were the communists, the Marxists. And there were a wide range of them, from the Trotskyists to the communists to the New Left. So, and then you had a lot of intellectual debate and discussion. And it was young people who had really taken over London at that time. And I think it's true. I was working in Air India. I had come from a completely different background. And I was so influenced by that atmosphere, I started questioning everything. And what I remember, you know, I think the anthem question at that time was, question everything, doubt everything, and find your own answers. And I certainly found mine.
Of this particular period, this is what you write in your book. What inspired me greatly was the national liberation struggle of Vietnam. Yeah. I started participating in the processions and protests against the Vietnam War, and I gather you were part of the famous Grosvenor Square protests as well. For someone who was only 20, 21 at the time, exactly. This must have been a very exciting period.
It was certainly. And I was with, I was with a group of people, 3 or 4 of them were Indians. One of them was a very close friend of mine called Mala Sen, who later wrote that book on Phulan Devi.
She did indeed.
You know, and she changed the whole approach to Phulan Devi, the popular perception of Phulan Devi, in a way, with her book. And her partner at the time was Farooq Dhondi, who was the center of this group of ours. And he was a real live wine. He organized this big group of us, and we marched to Grosvenor. And we were one of thousands and thousands of people. But yes, it was inspiring, I would say, more than just being excited. It was really an inspiring time because you saw hundreds and thousands of young people coming out against this blatantly unjust war on the US against Vietnam. And the forced conscription also, I think, made a big difference. Because young people were being forced to join the army and to go to a war they didn't believe in. And they were considered unpatriotic. And this was a kind of patriotism, actually, because they were saying to be patriotic today is to fight against this unjust war. And that was inspiring. And then that brought me to really understand what it was that inspired that small country, Vietnam, to take on and ultimately defeat the greatest empire of the US. And that was Marxism.
So would you
and that's
agree,
how I came to Marxism.
would you agree to be 18, 19, 20, 21 in London was probably heaven?
Well, I would say, it was heaven in the sense that if you allowed yourself to join that whole process of questioning, you could be in heaven by just having drugs, because there was
and many people were on drugs at the time.
A lot of people were on drugs. LSD was easily available.
Did you ever try them?
No. I was in a different stream at that time.
You were disciplined as well.
No, it wasn't a question of discipline, really. It was just being so inspired by something and being focused on trying to learn about it. It was a lot of fun. It was not all dour and grim, and we were in these dark studies. No, it was full of life because of the debates and discussions.
And London drew you to Marxism.
Vietnam drew me into Marxism. Vietnam drew me into Marxism, and then my friends there who made the literature available to me. And then, of course, the Air India office, where I could read Indian newspapers and learnt about the Indian communists. So I must thank Air India for that.
Now, when you returned to India, you joined the Communist Party Marxist. You fell in love with Prakash Karat. And when the two of you decided to get married, you chose November the 7th, the anniversary of the Russian Revolution. But the truth is that in 1917 in Russia, the revolution happened 12 days earlier on the 25th
Good
of
for
October.
You, Karan. I see you know your revolutionary history, but it wasn't not really. I didn't come back to India and fall in love with Prakash. I was in India, I was working in Bengal.
But you didn't fall in love with Prakash Karat, didn't you?
That was a couple of years later. But yes, I did. But the thing is that, so your question was that...
My question was a joke about the choosing of November 7th
as
November
the 7th,
date.
right.
Because so, actually the anniversary was October 25th.
You know your history well. Of course, it was called the October Revolution. So the Russian Revolution, the October Revolution, the Bolshevik Revolution, but it is celebrated all over the world as being on 7th November. The non-Gregorian calendar.
The confusion comes from the fact that the Russians at the time were on the Julian calendar and they changed very swiftly to the Gregorian.
Exactly.
You have a wonderful, very striking sentence in your book about being a wife. You write, I had no intention of being an ideal wife, communist or otherwise. What sort of wife have you been?
I think you have to ask Prakash that. But
what do you think he would say?
You'll have to ask him. I never guess. Ask Prakash. But what I would say is, when I made that comment, it is because people do expect women to be of a particular kind of wife.
Sati Savitri.
Sati Savitri, or, even if not so Sati Savitri, but certainly in a particularly undemocratic family structures that most patriarchal societies, certainly India, do have. And therefore, when Comrade Surjit, he was making a speech at our wedding, it was a party wedding, which means, we read out pledges to each other and then a speech is made. All this was sort of underground. So then...
And slap bang in the middle of the emergency as well.
Emergency, yeah. Prakash and I both felt that, is this time to get married? We shouldn't. And then Comrade Surjit said, well, there's no telling when the emergency is going to end, so then you better decide not to get married at all. So then we said, okay, so we'll get married. And then he came to the wedding. He was kind enough and gracious enough. And then he made this speech about Karl and Jenny Marx and how much Jenny sacrificed for Karl, which she did. She was a brilliant woman. And actually, we don't know enough about Jenny Marx. So I looked at Prakash and I thought to myself, well, he should know that I'm not going to be an ideal wife, communist.
You're not going to be his
otherwise.
Jenny by any stretch of the imagination.
I don't think I would even ever try, because Jenny was really, she was a wonderful, wonderful character.
The truth is, in fact, you forged a unique career for yourself, but I assume it always happened in the shadow of your husband's career, because he rose rapidly up the ranks to become General Secretary of the party for 10 years from 2005 to 2015. And I imagine, as you say in your book, you had to very carefully navigate Because you write, I found that often my own identity as a communist, as a woman, as a whole-timer of the party for so many decades, was all conflated with my being Prakash's wife. Can you explain that further?
Well, firstly, I would like to say, I won't say that I was always in the shadow, or a woman is always in the shadow of her husband's career. No, I don't think that's the case. That would be taking it to a real extreme. But I deliberately put this sentence in my book because it's a fact that in a patriarchal society where there's such male supremacist cultures, particularly in politics, it is always assumed, and now of course we have Narendra Modi ji who's made it an absolute anthem. I mean, he's made it his chorus of every speech. Family, family, dynasty, dynasty, which is just not true as far as women are concerned, because very often women independently, with their own agency, make a path for themselves in a political world. And so that was fine for all the years, but as you rightly say, I mean, I agree with you there, it was when Prakash actually became General Secretary, and there were so many important political issues which the media particularly were interested in. And then they sort of start scrutiny of who's who and where is, ABC. And it is at that time that you have to face that kind of scrutiny when there are certain sections who find it convenient, and I use the word convenient for their own agenda, whatever it may be, to just cancel out everything you've done or been or are, and just put you in a slot so that they can more easily attack, Prakash in that case. So
you had to be careful on both counts.
So
A, not to become a cause of attack on him, and B, not to be always appear as if you were just Prakash's wife.
Well, quite frankly, I just did my own thing, and I was very clear about it, because actually my work has been very, very different from Prakash's. I've been more in mass work. I've been in the trade unions, I've been with the women's organization, party at various levels.
In fact, you've been very lucky because your career has seen some thread running through what one would call some of the most epical moments of modern Indian history. You were there slap bang in the middle of the 1977 election, which is perhaps one of the most important elections India has ever fought. What was that election like? Was it always apparent from the word go that Congress would lose and that the emergency was in? Or was it a huge surprise when it happened?
No, the surprise was when the emergency was withdrawn. That was the real surprise, quite frankly. And we were completely taken aback by it. And then
you simply weren't expecting it?
No, we were not expecting it. Definitely not. I mean, that was something which was a surprise.
And what about that night when the results came out? Was that a sort of collective sigh of relief?
No, there was just an explosion of celebration. And, very often the emergency is seen through the eyes of, the attack on civil liberties, democracy, etc., which is all very true. But there was another aspect to it, and that was the attack on the working classes, the attack on workers' rights. And I was at that time situated in the center of one of the biggest trade unions in Delhi at the time, which was a textile workers' union. There was something like 26,000 workers at that time working in the textile industry in Delhi. And their experience of the emergency and their feeling of relief to be able to come out to the gates and express that, it was so apparent. And I
think that's very hard for the generation that's alive today and never experienced the emergency to actually understand.
Well, I think they should understand, because although the emergency was bad enough, it was for 2 years and it was withdrawn. And we got India back and our democracy back through our own struggle. But quite frankly, Karan, I would draw a parallel here for young people today, that look at what's happening around you. We fought the emergency, but today our young people are understanding how not just certain civil liberties, but the whole constitution of India is under such a blatant assault by those in power today. So young people are experiencing, I would say, a much bigger assault on minimum democratic rights than we faced during the emergency.
And are the young standing up to it the way you did when you were young?
Well, I'm sure they are. I mean, I am sure, I'm confident of that.
Okay.
And I hope that strength will increase. But I think we all need to stand up and be
During the
counted.
Janta government days that succeeded the emergency, you continued to work with textile mill workers,
Yes, I
and on
did.
one occasion, you ended up in jail.
Yeah.
You were falsely accused of attempting to murder a police inspector when the truth was that he was guilty of beating you. What was jail like?
Well, that was, yes, it was my first time in jail, I think. And so I had heard so much about jail and the conditions, but I was really surprised because I was taken into quite a well-ventilated room. And there were very few other inmates there, and it really seemed quite comfortable to me.
And you even remarked that the toilet was quite clean.
It was because in my later terms in jail, the cells were awful stinky. And this is before Kiran Bedi also and her reforms. But at that time, I was told then, when I said, well, jail? And then I was told, this is the cell where Indira Gandhi had been jailed, imprisoned in that very room, in that very cell.
So you slept on the floor Indira Gandhi had slept upon herself?
By the way, it was not a floor. We were given, there wouldn't usually
proper charpais.
We were with charpais, but usually in jail now they do have those stone slabs also for certain categories of prisoners where you can just sleep on a stone slab. So I was on a charpai, yeah.
Now it was in jail that you met Charles Sobhraj. Tell me, how did that happen?
No, I never met Charles. So what happened was that a girl, an Australian girl, who was involved in the Charles Sobhraj case, she was an accused in the case. So when we used to walk around, I used to hang out with her and to hear all her stories, and she told me the whole saga about Charles Sobhraj. Later, by the way, she turned approver, and she was released within a few months. I heard later. But one day, when my lawyers were there waiting for me, I got a message. I went into this jail superintendent's office, and who should I see there on a bench in a close embrace with another accused? It was none other than Charles Sobhraj. I just looked, and I looked again, and I looked again. And that was not a scene that you would expect in a jail superintendent's office, but there you are.
They used to say that Charles Sobhraj terrorized the Indian police. Was he a terror to behold?
I really didn't get to see him because he was in such a close embrace. I didn't really see him, but yeah.
Certainly that is bravado, isn't it? To be in the jail superintendent's office embracing another jailbird.
I mean, so he must have had, exactly. So he must have had pretty important contacts to be able to do that.
Now, in the 80s, you immersed yourself in several anti-dowry campaigns. And on one occasion, you got accused of contempt of court. What did you do wrong, and what was the punishment you got?
This was the Sudha Goel case in which the court had said that dowry is a practice, a common practice by those who believe in Hinduism. It's a Hindu common practice, dowry. And I mean, that was just the most awful thing. And this woman had been burned to death, Sudha Goel. And after this High Court judgment, we were all so enraged. There was not just my organization, which was a Janwadi Mahila Samiti, but it was a united front. So we just were so enraged. We went there, we fought, the police tried to, battle us back. We jumped over the High Court wall at that time. It wasn't such a high wall. We went into the court, just in the porch of the court, and shouted slogans. And then a bunch of lawyers filed a contempt case against us.
For jumping over the wall?
For shouting slogans against the court and about that judgment. So they were infuriated and said, how dare you lower the prestige of the court? And therefore we were all called up before a bench which had Justice Rajinder Sacha and Justice Leela Seth. And it just shows that there are people, and there were people, and I'm sure even today, with the challenges the judiciary face under this present government and the regime, who listen to their conscience and who understand the law, and particularly the anti-dowry laws.
So what was the punishment these two enlightened judges gave you?
So we argued our case before the court. And
you yourself, as your lawyer?
Yeah. That was the first time. And I argued my case. Suman Krishna Kant, I think, also argued the case for her organization. We decided that. And then after the court, they said, well, the facts are such that we do hold you in contempt of court. Your punishment is to stay in this room until the court rises. So that was.
So you were benched for a couple of hours, and that's it.
We were benched for a couple of hours, and it was just an hour away from.
Now, the amazing thing is that in those days, the media would fairly assiduously cover the work you did in terms of anti-dowry campaigning. They clearly wouldn't do that today. Would you agree that's one measure of how much India has changed in the last 45 years?
Absolutely. I mean, that is, I think, a very, very true and accurate statement. And I think that is what is so sad, because there is so much social injustice today. And the media, the way the media reports it is really to sensationalize it in such a way, and very often to communalize it. I mean, if you look at Shraddha Walker's case, for example, the way it was projected as though it was just a Hindu-Muslim issue, when it was also about the vulnerability of this woman, the fact that she remained in a violent relationship. She didn't share that violence. She didn't share that experience with so many of her friends, as they said. So the media just completely blanks out all that.
That wouldn't have happened 45 years ago.
I don't think so. And I think the women journalists at that time were themselves so committed to this aspect of a fight for equality. That's just completely, I don't know whether it's disappeared in the minds and hearts of journalists.
So you're saying it's not just journalism that's changed, but journalists themselves as people with the commitment to causes has also altered?
Well, I don't know whether I'm qualified to say that, but I can certainly say whether it's them or whether it's a combination of their owners and them, or whether they just feel that they don't have the space to do what they want. And I know so many journalists today who are so frustrated. I mean, look at what happened to NewsClick, for example. That is an example of such an attack on a small news portal just because they challenged the government. So those journalists are also there, and there are many like them. But so I won't just brush all the media with the same brush. But certainly, yes, there is a big change, Karan. There's a huge change. There's no space now for struggles for social change and for justice. Very little space.
The other big political development that you were a part of was the aftermath after the dreadful Sikh killings of 1984. What was that period like, and what was the mood and atmosphere in Delhi like?
Oh, it was horrific. I mean, for me, of course, we'd read about and heard about the communal conflagrations. Everything happened after partition and even before. But to actually see it, and to see the hatred. Some of it was spontaneous, a lot of it was organized.
But the hatred showed on people's faces.
I tell you, I was right there. One of our comrades, we went to a place called Manikpura, near the DCM mill. We got there, my comrade Rahul Verma and myself. I was on his motorbike. The police tried to stop us, but we did reach there. And there was our comrade standing there before a baying crowd, and a woman who knew him so well. She was weeping and saying, "My mother has been killed," meaning Indira Gandhi. My mother has been killed. I'm going to burn his shop." There was a line of Sikh-owned shops in that area. And he was standing there almost single-handedly trying to prevent it. So there was anger, but it was organized. Because soon after that, the ruling party at the time, the Congress, called him and said, "Leave this area for the next 3-4 hours. Come back after that." And obviously he refused. So that day, a party there, the unit there, saved about 20 or 25 Sikh houses.
As you look back on that dreadful time, how complicit were Congress ministers and Congress MPs? We've all heard of the complicity of the Congress. Is it foolproof?
Absolutely, because we saw it. I tell you, in a place like Nandnagari, where H.K.L. Bhagatji was there, and we had surveys done. We had lists of women who had said that they had been sexually assaulted. We had lists of widows. They gave names. Some of them gave names. We gave it to the Thana. The Thana, in fact, did arrest some. H.K.L. Bhagat came and got them all released. That's exactly what happened. And in many of the areas we went, there were people, there were witnesses who said that they had been directly informed that such and such lead of the Congress had got the gangs together. So there's no doubt about it, Karan. They were very much involved.
Like this.
And something else, though, if I may just, what I've said in my book too, what we found is that all the RSS shakhas, and this I can tell you for a fact, in most of North Delhi, where all the workers' bastis were, they came and they were also inciting in the name of Hindu religion and against Khalistanis, against the Sikhs. There's no doubt about it. In one area, in Roshanara Bagh, where there was Sikh families, they were actually saved by the Dalit Basti next door, the Harijan Basti. And later on, we were told that it was the RSS which was inciting them actually to go and loot the shops. Now, obviously, if somebody says, I'm going to pull you up for defamation, why are you using the RSS name here? But many of the FIRs which were filed in that time also had leaders.
If I hear you correctly, it seems everyone turned upon the Sikhs. The Congress party turned against them, the RSS, as you say, turned against them. Other than people like yourself.
No, not myself.
Other than people like yourself, and there were thousands like yourself who threw themselves into defense, to protect, to clothe, to shelter.
Absolutely.
But in a very real sense, the Sikhs had their backs to the wall.
No doubt about it. I know families among the workers. One of our activists, both her sisters, she had to go and rescue them. The army had taken them out, but they were just at the brink of being killed. They had to disguise themselves, they had to cut their hair, they had to get rid of any Sikh identity. And, when I think of it today, I think of the horror of 1984, and then I hear of the mob lynchings today against the minorities, against the Muslim minority. It's not just deja vu. At that time, there were Congress leaders. It was stopped in 2 or 3 days. Here, it seems to be like an endless siege.
But when it happened in 84, would you say nothing like this had ever happened in India before that you can recall and remember after partition?
I had very little experience, but yes, in my experience, although, of course, in the early 70s, for example, in Kerala, there had been, which I read about now, that there had been terrible communal attacks in Kerala, not Sikhs, not anti-Sikh violence, but against Muslims. So there have been, but in my own limited personal experience, face to face with religion being used in that manner, it was horrific and sad and tragic and brutal.
Now, your book covers the period 1975 to 1985. Its subtitle is A Memoir, 1975-1985. Would you agree that those were the formative years that have forged the Brinda Karat sitting in front of me?
Well, I guess, when you talk about formative, there's so many formative experiences in an individual's life. It was formative when I was in London and I became a Marxist. It was formative when I joined, with great difficulty, the party in Bengal. But yes, I think I would say that my experience of working in Delhi, of working with the working class, the trade unions, and collectively trying to build a women's organization, it was a foundation which has certainly helped me weather many a storm.
And as I read the book,
decades.
I got the clear feeling that this is a period of your life that you look back upon with great fondness. Am I mistaken?
Absolutely right, Karan. That's true. I hope it's not too sentimental, but yeah, it's true.
It's evocative. Not just the book. I'm going to end the interview by drawing your attention to the picture on the cover.
Oh,
there
God,
it is.
That's quite scary,
there
actually.
It is. Your right hand is broken. It's in plaster and in a sling. Your
that
left
was
hand...
of Delhi cops again. And by the way, that case is
You've
another...
been beaten by a Delhi cop.
That was my arm was broken by the Delhi cops, and then they told the Supreme Court in my petition that I fell and broke my arm.
So they lied through their teeth.
Lied through their teeth.
But just look at that picture. Your right hand is broken, it's in plaster, it's in a sling. Your left hand is gesticulating clearly in protest. Your mouth is open, you're probably shouting a political slogan. And I'll add that this is the image that for many people is typical of the Brinda Karat that comes to mind. Is it a fair impression of Brinda Karat?
Well, frankly, Karan, looking at it from this angle is quite a scary picture. But yes, I mean, if you look at it as a metaphor for resistance, well, I do belong to a movement, which is a movement for justice and resistance. Not me just personally, but the movement and the party I belong to. So yes, I own that picture.
Brinda Karat, thank you very much for talking to me.
Thank you so much, Karan. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch the interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me.